Hi, I'm Nathan Oakley, and this video will be about the acoustic treatment of my YouTube studio. So in this video, I'm going to be discussing the process from start to finish. You can see on screen now some of the starting points of me doing the treatment where the walls are pretty bare and I'm fiddling around with various things that I've made myself, purchased at great expense and purchased at minimal expense. So you can probably see the clear sonic panels on the wall next to some rather expensive GIK panels, or a GIK panel, along with some foam bass traps. So that was sort of my starting point to fiddle around with this stuff and figure out what I wanted to buy, what worked, what didn't, what was effective and what wasn't. And there was obviously an instant difference even with just a few panels. So from there I went on to actually gather up my funds and start treating the room. Now the entire process so far, at the time of making this video, has been about 9 months, and what I've done is I've taken my Patreon contributions each month and put them towards maybe 1 or 2 panels, and then moved on. Next month I've done the same, and so on and so forth, until the room is now maybe 80% treated. So I keep telling myself that I'm nearly done, and I just want to kind of get to the end of this project. To be honest, now it's taken quite a considerable amount of time. So my most recent purchases go behind these curtains that you can see on screen now, and there are a couple of full-length bass straps that I made a video recently for my Patrons about. So let's talk about Patreon first and foremost, as most of the videos and the process of doing this treatment has been published on Patreon for the benefit of my patrons, as it's been them that's actually been funding it, as I've been doing it over the last 9 months. So as I say, each time I've done a little bit of treatment, I've kind of shown what I've put up and what it's cost, and etc, etc, etc. So the starting point of the room was it being very reverberative, if that's the correct way of saying it. Not echo, but lots of long decay times in everything that I said. So having not measured, on the advice of some of the acousticians that I've been watching hundreds, if not thousands of hours of over the time, have been advising on various different things, and the process shouldn't necessarily start with measuring the room, as it can be very deceptive. So I hadn't necessarily done that. I've just been showing you pictures of my self-made panels on their little journey through the process of this. The main actual supplier that I've used is GIK. So GIK, although I haven't actually sought that much acoustic advice from them, have been very willing to purchase, to sell me things in the amounts and quantities that I wanted to buy them. So many of the people that you will see online for acoustic treatment will want to sell you a specific quantity, and given that I was buying it on a month-by-month basis, piecemeal, I needed to be able to buy maybe 1 panel at a time, given that they may cost maybe £100 a panel. I just didn't have the funds to buy them all at once. But GIK were willing to do exactly that, albeit with a higher degree of postage charges, which I haggled every step of the way and tried to negotiate as much postage as possible off them as I purchased the bits and bobs from them. So that's my sort of room before being treated. And what I've actually gone on to do is start by treating the axial modes in the room, and that would be to say treat the opposing walls to try and get as many modes covered in the room. So in a nutshell, if you've got a small space, which is anything maybe the size of a classroom or less, you'll get a pressure in the room based on its width, depth and height. And the only way to compensate for that is to absorb the velocity of that particular sound as it travels through the air. Now, that can be done for the most part with large acoustic panels, which are velocity absorbers. The ending process of this particular treatment is going to end with pressure absorbers, which is what I'm going to do a little GoFundMe for, hopefully, so I can actually finish off this room and get the studio treatment completed. So I'll do a very small, not very ambitious, low amount GoFundMe to hopefully clear out a little bit of debt that I've accumulated to get some good deals from GIK, and indeed move forward and buy a couple of pressure traps, which I'll speak about in a minute. So velocity absorbers come in lots of different varieties, and in this particular space, all of them have been as deep as can be possibly made. So based on the acoustic advice of, I think it was Yesko from Acoustics Insider, I'll go through all of the people who've given me advice as I go through the video, but Yesko was of the opinion, or the first one to advise us at least, that the velocity absorbers, or what are incorrectly named as bass traps, be as thick as you can possibly make them. So rather than going with maybe a couple of inch traps, which I've had to do on the back wall, I've tried to keep the absorbers on both side walls and on the front and back wall as thick as I can possibly get them, and same goes for the melamine foam which goes on the ceiling. So based on Jesko's advice, I've tried to keep everything above 4 inches deep, for all of the different velocity absorbers that are dotted around on all of the different walls. Same goes for the traps in the corners. All of them are about a foot deep, if not more, 30 centimetres. And yeah, that's their sole purpose, is to trap whatever you can get out of the corners, which isn't necessarily the best place to trap bass, although it's people are led to believe that when you start doing research on this sort of stuff. So the panels that I've got they are called impressions. That's the ones you're looking at the moment. And these particular panels have got scatter plates on the front of them so that you can diffuse some of the energy that's coming towards them, and not all of it is absorbed through the squares that are left exposed with the rock wall or whatever the hell it is they use over at GIK, the absorptive material behind these hexagon shaped panels. And basically I've got the majority of the panels are these impressions panels. So the ones you're looking at now are, I think, about 4.5 inches deep. They call them bass traps, like most of them do, because that's the name that they've been given, although they don't really trap very much bass. I mean, these 4-inch ones maybe go down to about 150, maybe 100 hertz on a good day in their effective trapping range. But those are 2 foot by 2 foot panels, and the majority of panels that you'll see are that size. The ones next to them, the ones in the background there, you can see, are called monster bass traps. And the monster bass traps are thicker. They're about 6, maybe 7 inches deep. And again, they're velocity traps, same as most of them in this room. Behind those, I've got what are called membrane traps. Now, they're based on the same principle as a velocity trap, but they've got, as the name suggests, a membrane that goes in the front of them, so that they are, on the most part, just absorbing the bass frequencies. And the ones that I've got to fit in the gap that I've got are half width and double length. And the foam that I'm going to put up in the final corners, I'm already going to get as a Christmas present, so that's going to come from my mum and dad as a Christmas present. They're going to be tucked up in the corners with a bit of glue just to polish off the last back corners. So that's basically all you need to know in terms of the velocity traps that I've got in here. As you've probably just seen rolling by, I've got some diffusers, one of which from GIK is called a Gotham diffuser, which is an N23 quadratic residue diffuser, to give it its more accurate name. And that's been put into the room in a cluster of 3, or an array of 3 diffusers across the front wall. And yeah, that's together with all of the diffusion fronts or scatter plates that go onto the velocity absorbers. So as you can probably see rolling by now, these are room mode calculations that give you an idea of what treatment needs to go, and which modes you're treating, so you can be cognizant of where to put the treatment, to treat what frequencies, how much of it you need. A lot is the answer, and what you'll actually treat for. So this particular calculator lets you set what you're treating for, in my case voice, and then figure out what traps you'll need and the coefficients of each of the traps. GIK published them all, which is very handy, so that you can end up with this, which is what I've got as my semi-end result, which is most of the walls now treated. The ceiling is also treated with the melamine foam, and then behind the curtain, as you saw a moment ago, I've got the quadratic residue diffusers, along with a couple more bass traps that actually sit behind the curtains, which were my most recent purchases. So to get those, they were being sold second hand, and I wanted to get them there and then. I think they were seconds as opposed to second hand, sort of lesser quality. You can just see them tucked behind the curtain there. And I bought those with a bit of PayPal credit just so I could get them, together with another order, which was for several panels, more than I would normally order, again, to get the postage down on them. So to get the what they're called, membrane traps, and the traps that are behind these curtains, together with a free, I kid you not, QRD diffuser. So one of these panels that you can see now in the middle is actually a freebie from GIK Acoustic. So massive shout out to them. I begged, borrowed, and as much as I could to get all the free delivery I could, and they eventually, after about 7 months of pestering them, did concede and give me a free item, which was that QRD diffuser. So that brings me on to the final traps that I want to buy, and as I say, run a little GoFundMe campaign to see if I can actually raise the funds to do this. If nothing else, hopefully pay off the little bit of debt that I've accumulated in treating this studio so far. And all of these coefficients may or may not be of interest to you, but it says on the screen what they are actually for. These are the massive panels that are velocity absorbers, but the panels that I'm actually looking to get are going to be the membrane / depending on who you ask, diaphragmatic absorbers, which are basically a panel that resonates at a particular frequency. And I've left them to last, as is suggested again by Yasko Acoustics Insider, so that they aren't the first thing that you treat, leaving a whole load of untreated frequencies in the room. So they are unfortunately the most expensive thing in terms of panels. They're about £150 for one 2-foot by 2-foot panel, and I approximately need 4 of them, but I don't think I'll be acquiring 4 of them with this particular GoFundMe campaign. But nevertheless, that's an opener to all of the acoustic treatment. This particular video may not make it to air in terms of its audio, as I'm going to use this as a backdrop to a more live stream orientated video that will have me over talking the top of this particular video rather than just publishing it as is. So it might not be the case that you ever get to hear this audio, but if you are, I'll cut to the GoFundMe stuff so you can have a look at it. It might be that the campaign's running while this is still going on. If you've got to this stage in the video, there's not going to be anything more in terms of my information on acoustic treatment. But here is the information on my GoFundMe campaign, so go and check it out if it is still running or if this video is still recent, and hopefully I can reach my target of, I think I'll set it at probably about £500 or £600, fairly low amount, and that's pretty much it. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I'll see you all in the next video.